Today I'm going to be talking on some slept on spells. Now these spells originally might not seem like they have a common theme, but they do. The spells I'm going to be taking a look at are Erupting Earth, Tidal Wave, and Wither and Bloom. What do all those have in common? Well, they're on the Druid spell list, and I am specifically talking about Druids here. These spells are slept on spells for Druids. Now you might be thinking, Druids have way better spells than those. They have Call Lightning, Conjure Animals, Summon Beast, so on and so forth. Why would I cast these spells? Well, did you notice something about those three spells I just mentioned? All concentration. Druids are notorious for having a ton of concentration spells. So what happens for a lot of Druid players is that they take a whole bunch of these concentration spells and they can only really cast one per battle. Unless they lose concentration, then they cast something else. But the point I'm making is that a lot of Druids, their whole game is going to be cast a concentration spell and use a cantrip. That's where these spells come in. All of these are non-concentration spells. Now they're not crazy insane spells. Like we can't say Erupting Earth is as good as Fireball, but it is still a good spell. That can be used with the resources that we have a surplus of because we are economical with our spells due to the best ones being concentration. So a lot of, again, going back to the problem with Druids is a lot of Druids are going to only cast these concentration spells, and by the time they get to the end of the day, they're going to have a surplus of like 15 spell slots, a crazy amount of spell slots. These spells help us use that resource to be better than cantrips to have more effect on our combats. So let's dive into these spells a little bit each. Starting with Wither and Bloom, because we get it first at second level, you got to keep in mind that when we first get our second level spells, we're going to want to be using it for Summon Beast for concentration, for example. But as we get later down the line and we're wanting to cast a fourth level spell as our concentration spell, now Wither and Bloom starts looking a lot better. So all of these spells I'm talking about, they don't come online the level you get them, they come online a little bit later when you have better concentration spells. So where is Wither and Bloom good? So Wither and Bloom is good if there is just a cluster of enemies and allies. You can't really cast Erupting Earth on that cluster because you're going to hit a bunch of your allies and put them in difficult terrain, and it's a mess. Wither and Bloom does not have that problem. Wither and Bloom doesn't do a ton amount of damage to everybody it hits, and it doesn't heal a ton. But if you hit a bunch of people, it's going to damage your enemies and heal your allies, and if you get a whole bunch of people who are taking a little chunk of damage, then that is a high value spell. So if you have a bunch of melee combatants who are getting in a cluster fight with a bunch of other melee combatants, that is the perfect time for Wither and Bloom. Moving on to our third level spells, we have Tidal Wave. Tidal Wave is mostly inferior to Erupting Earth, but with that line, you can basically guarantee you hit two enemies without hitting an ally. That should be a fairly common occurrence, and really where this one shines is if your team can capitalize on the prone condition. If you have a bunch of allies with melee attacks, then the prone condition can be a big deal, and that's when we're going to consider this over Erupting Earth. Now, Erupting Earth is what I'd say is the kind of gold standard. It's budget Fireball. It's going to do a decent amount of damage to a decent amount of people and create difficult terrain on top of it to help restrict their movement. It's not as good of a blast spell as Fireball, but it has some control elements to add into it. And it might not be as good of a control spell as other spells, but it has some blast. So it's kind of a middle ground. Now, this video is more about a concept to take a look at Druid spells through that lens, because then you can take a look at first level spells and find Ice Knife. Ice Knife, I think, is outcompeted by cantrips pretty quickly, but it is a spell that you can be using when you have your second level spells and you're concentrating on Summon Beast. You can throw an Ice Knife. It's one of those type of spells. You can find that at fourth level spell, maybe in something Blight. So this thing continues, and I think it's an important part of playing a good Druid. But those are just my thoughts. I'd love to hear your guys's down in the comments below. But other than that, hope you have yourselves a lovely day, and I'll catch you on the next one. Later.